It was long known that organs and limbs in the body had arteries and veins going into and out of them. Harvey suspected that arteries and veins were physically connected in some way, but the connection was not visible to the naked eye. To test this idea, Harvey cut an animal's artery and drained all of the blood from the animal. He then examined the veins for blood. We can see the reasoning in our format here. If arteries and veins are physically connected, and we drain the arteries of blood and then check the veins for blood, then the veins should be empty. And in fact, the results were the same as predicted, so the hypothesis was supported. Notice then, he's gathering evidence of the physical connection between arteries and veins, even though he couldn't see that physical connection. Inside the veins, but not arteries, are tiny little flaps of tissue that we now call valves. These valves allow blood to flow in one direction only. Galen probably noticed these valves, but did not appreciate their significance. Harvey did. Harvey realized that the valves in the veins allowed blood in the veins to move in one direction only, towards the heart. This meant that blood going to the body tissues must be traveling in arteries. In Harvey's mind, the blood seemed to be moving in a circuit. He began to investigate the possibility that blood was circulated throughout the body. Now in this picture we see a drawing of a vein here, which is a blood vessel, and it's hollow so that blood can travel through it. And up top here we see the valve. And the valve consists of these flaps of tissue that allow blood to move in one direction but not the opposite direction. Here we see the cross section of a vein, and again the blood can move in this direction through the one-way valve, but blood can't move in the opposite direction because these flaps will close up and prevent the blood from moving in the opposite direction. So these are one-way valves. And again, the argument is a clever argument by Harvey. If the veins only have these one-way valves, and that means that the blood is only allowed in the veins to move towards the heart. Well, if the blood can only move back to the heart in the veins, then the blood must be moving to the body parts through arteries. So arteries must be taking the blood from the heart to the body, and then the blood must be returning to the heart through the veins. The existence of these valves helped Harvey put the pieces together that the blood was being circulated around the body. Now in his book he has this famous drawing, and this is a technique to illustrate the existence of these valves in the veins without cutting open your veins to see them. Now what Harvey's doing in this illustration, here we have a visible vein in the forearm, and he's applying pressure in the vein, and then he's going to squeeze the blood in the direction of the heart. And when the blood moves past a valve at this location, there's a valve, the blood cannot go backwards. Even if you apply pressure at this region on the vein, you can't squeeze the blood back into that section that you just squeezed the blood out of. So at this point then, this is Harvey's thinking so far. The heart is a pump, and the adult septum, that muscular wall between the ventricles, does not allow blood to flow from the right to the left ventricle. Animals with lungs have two ventricles. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs, and blood returns to the left side of the heart. Valves in the veins keep blood moving to the heart, so arteries take blood away from the heart. And the veins and arteries are likely connected because draining blood from the arteries leaves the veins empty as well. So Harvey is thinking that blood travels in a circuit around the body, but he was unable to directly observe connections between veins and arteries. However, Harvey was not deterred. He collected more indirect evidence that veins and arteries were connected, this time using quantitative data. Now, we'll need to follow along with his calculations here, but this is a very powerful observation that blood, in fact, is being circulated around the body. So let's take a look at what he does here. So first of all, he's going to try to calculate how much blood does this left ventricle chamber hold, and he estimates about 3 ounces of blood. Then he conservatively suggests that maybe a quarter of that volume is expelled per heartbeat. So when we do the math, 3 ounces times 1/4 of an ounce per beat, we get 3 ounces of blood expelled per heartbeat. So he has now measured the output of the heart. So we've got 3/4 ounces of blood expelled per heartbeat. And again, conservatively, depending on the animal, he says there are 33 beats per minute for this particular animal. Doing the math, 3/4 ounce per beat times 33 beats per minute. That's 25 ounces of blood expelled per minute. Well, if we continue with the math, 25 ounces of blood expelled per minute times 60 minutes in an hour, that's 1,500 ounces of blood per hour. That's 93.75 pounds of blood pumped by the heart per hour. But wait, as we've noted before, when Harvey drained blood from animals, he could just collect up all the blood and see how much it is. There are only 5 pounds of blood in the entire animal. So for the heart to pump 93.75 pounds of blood per hour, but the animal only has 5 pounds of blood in total, then it must be the same 5 pounds of blood must be circulated many times through the heart. And so Harvey concludes that the blood must be circulating. This was a very powerful calculation. And in addition to all of his other observations, he persuaded most people that the blood, in fact, is circulated around the body, and the heart is the pump that keeps it all circulating. Now let's use this diagram to pull together what Harvey is proposing for the circulation of blood. We'll start with the heart. The heart is a pump, not a furnace, and it's got 2 major pumping chambers, the ventricles. The right ventricle is pumping blood to the lungs. Now, because this is carrying blood away from the heart, we call this an artery. It's the pulmonary artery. Now, recall that Harvey could not see the connection between the large vessels here and then the large vessels on the other side of the lungs. He could not see capillaries, but he gathered indirect evidence that these 2 blood vessels were connected. So the blood passes through the lungs and then makes its way back to the left side of the heart. And this pumping chamber, the left ventricle, will pump blood out to the body. So the arteries here are carrying blood to the body. But again, these arteries are going to get smaller and smaller into tiny blood vessels. They're microscopic, called capillaries. Capillaries are those blood vessels that connect the arteries and the veins. So blood ends up back into the veins, and remember, it's in the veins where we have the valves. The valves keep the blood moving towards the heart. So we have a dual circulation system. One side of the heart, the right ventricle, pumping blood to the lungs and then back to the heart, and then the left side of the heart is pumping blood to the body and then back into the veins and back to the heart. Now these capillaries, these tiny blood vessels, we can see a cross-section what a capillary looks like. All blood vessels are made of cells, including the tiniest blood vessels, the capillaries. And this gray thing here is a cross-section of a capillary cell. And what it has done here is it's produced extensions of its membrane, kind of like an amoeba, to connect up with itself, forming a hollow chamber. And in this hollow space, that's where blood travels. So capillary cells create a hollow space through which blood cells travel. In the final lesson of this series, we'll return to what's happening up here in the lungs. You'll recall the ancients thought that air in the lungs was sent to the heart, and we will see that it's sort of the opposite. The blood is sent to the lungs to be mixed with air, rather than the mixing happening here in the heart.